Please pray with me. Speak to our hearts, Holy One, message of love and new life. Amen. How did it all come about? I mean, Mother's Day. Whether we have seen reruns or the original show, some of you may know the memorable quote of Sophia Petrillo in Golden Girls. "Picture it," she often said, and I'd like for you to picture it with me now. May 1907, or was it 1908? The records are inconsistent. A daughter, Anna Jarvis, held a memorial service for her mother, who had been instrumental in organizing women's groups to promote friendship and health. Hundreds of people attended. That day, she wore a white carnation in tribute to her late mom and the sacrifices mothers made for children. That image propelled action. Within 5 years, almost every US state observed what had become known as Mother's Day. Jarvis lobbied for the day to be a national holiday, and in 1914, President Woodrow Wilson proclaimed it as such. By then, people wore a white carnation for deceased mothers and a red or pink carnation for living mothers. As we know, the red tradition continues today. As happens, commercialism was infused, and soon cards were printed and gifts, some very expensive, were given. Jarvis, who had earlier promoted the holiday, was absolutely horrified. This is not what she intended. She didn't want commercialism to replace the interaction of parent and child love. Jarvis spent the remaining days of her life trying to abolish the day she started in the US. Clearly, she was unsuccessful. Happy Mother's Day to all in mothering roles. While we hail the amazing miracle of birth and other methods of bringing a young person into our worlds, we know that while we love this day, Mother's Day is also a painful time for some. We pause to acknowledge that fact. There's bereavement, especially during these pandemic times. And there are those who, for any number of reasons, find this day difficult. Some children, young and adult, experience estrangement issues. There are those who are abandoned at birth, but found themselves into loving homes. There are those who yearn to be a mother or a mother example, but biologically struggle. There is discomfort and anxiety. This is not political correctness. This is reality. There is a need for sensitivity, kindness, and compassion as we express our joy. And with this reality, those of us who name the name of Christ proclaim that love. We have a role to play in comforting and mending wounded hearts. I just wonder, if there was Mother's Day during Jesus' time, what gift would he have given Mary, his mother? Mary, Miriam, or the Greek Maria, called by some the Mother of God. According to the Gospels and the Muslim Quran, Mary was a first-century Galilean Jewish woman of Nazareth, wife of Joseph. Perhaps motherly intuition allowed her to know that Jesus was different. One example was when his parents accidentally left him in the temple as a youngster. When they found him, he announced that he was about his father's business. We are told that Mary treasured these things, or one interpretation said pondered these things in her heart. Sounds like a mother to me. Later, it was his mother and other family members who followed him in ministry. He also told Peter to take care of his mother. It was Mary, his mother, who was at the cross when her son was mercilessly crucified. She was the only person to be with Jesus from his birth to his death. I have been told that the joy of the miracle of bringing life into the world is unexplainable. And so is, in a different way, bringing life other than by birth, Both are a blessing. Love is the connection, and it is mothering love that surrounds most children. And it is the gift of mothering that draws us to and highlights this day. Most of us can recall a time when those in a mothering position told us that we were loved. We were then raised to know love in a familial setting. But friends also say that we love each other. We even spell the word love in capitals, L-U-V. It's meant to be special. Or we use an emoji or an image of a heart or two. Yet, as we get older, love becomes a loaded and perhaps a more complicated word with all of its characteristics. Rollo May, one of the world's leading existential psychologists, long ago said that we are made to love and be loved. And while we may be tempted to equate love with our limited understanding, perhaps we need to remind ourselves of the basic kinds of love. Eros, love of the body, romantic or sexual. Agape, selfish love. We are concerned for the well-being of someone else. Philia, compassionate love, where we get the city of brotherly love, Philadelphia, from. Only agape and philia are used in the New Testament. The list has grown since May mentioned these, and that may tell us how love is ever evolving, but none accurately encapsulates the love that Jesus spoke of. We have often heard of his sayings, love one another, and the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do to you, which also typifies love. In the verses leading up to our gospel reading today, Jesus, nearing the end of his life, continued with a series of I am statements. The phrase somehow equated him with God the parent. Verse 1 to 8 lay the groundwork for our reading today of verses 9 to 17. The idea is that everything begins with God. Jesus continued with an interesting equation. It goes like this: God the parent loves me, therefore I love you. Stay in my love. He says it consecutively in verse 9 and 10, abide or stay in my love. If we do that, then we love each other and we will be joyous people. And as we remain in the love of Jesus, we are immersed in love, surrounded by his love, comforted by his love, and empowered by his love. It sounds like a mother's love to me. Or perhaps I should say a mother's love is godly love. This continues in the heart of the Gospels. For God so loved that God gave the Son. After reading this passage a few times and spending some quiet time, I was reminded of the power of the word love. Did you notice that in these 8 verses, the word love is used 9 times? In a world where we look around and question, where is love? We are reminded that we are loved and that we are to be loved. But in order to share that love, it would be helpful if we love ourselves first. In our gospel, Jesus was speaking to his disciples. But today, we are those disciples. When he reminded us to stay in love, what was Jesus trying to convey? Possibly that in the midst of life situations, God's constant and consistent love will always be present. Jesus felt compelled to assure the disciples that they were friends because he wanted to share God-given love that is unconditional. And how do we show that love today? We show agape love by our involvement with social justice, helping to feed the poor, and whatever other helping ways we can conceive. Sometimes love is simply being a listening ear on the end of a telephone. At times, love is a smile, even under our masked faces, because our eyes speak. Or could it be that email with an emoji indicating a hug? Today, in the love of God, we remember mothering types to include our exhausted, overworked, undercompensated healthcare workers who are taking care of patients in long-term care homes, palliative care units, and throughout hospitals. Many are from marginalized communities who may not connect with family until the end of a long day. And we cannot overlook mothering types who are responsible for orphanages, group homes, foster care, and other families. Internationally, I think of the grandmothers of sub-Saharan Africa who stepped in as mothers to children whose parents had died in the AIDS crisis. Other mothers who globally fought and fight for basic health care, education for women, the right to vote, civil rights and democracy. How many songs, religious and secular, have you heard that relate to love? Think about them. You'd be surprised. Yet we sometimes feel like we live in a loveless world. It is our role to stay in God's love and show that love. We've often heard the phrase that there is no love like a mother's love. I believe it. My mother died 3 years ago. She and my dad raised their children in love. Mom was one who understood life for me. Church going and on various Anglican church committees, she voiced and instilled a "you can do it" mentality, or "you can't do better than your best." She seemed to know me better than I did myself. And while I garnered strength and determination from both parents, Mom's advice rings fresh. Days after her funeral, I was walking past a store and a plant that I had never seen before beckoned me. I'm sure some of you have had that feeling. You see, my mother loved gardening, and I love gardening. I looked at the plant and quickly purchased it. A lovely Japanese pears. It's planted in my backyard, and I see it as I look out of my kitchen window daily. It's not a fussy plant. It likes sun or shade. It doesn't matter the season. It stands there, fully leafed, proudly determined, reminding me of motherly love. Today, we are encouraged to be examples of love and be loved. I began with, how did it all begin? Mother's Day. And I end with, how did it all begin? But also, how is it now with God's unconditional love for us? It began with Mary, who birthed Jesus, Jesus the prophet, Jesus the teacher, a son of God through whom God reveals and gives ultimate love for humanity. We are then called friends. As 21st century disciples, we now must share this message of love and fellowship to a waiting, wanting, and desperate world in need of hearing good news. May it be so.